Hi there, Mike here. In this video, we're going to walk through how to dual boot Windows 11 and Bazzite. Dual booting gives you the best of both worlds. You can keep Windows for any software that requires it, while enjoying the gaming performance and features that Bazzite brings to the table. We'll be covering both how to dual boot on the same drive as Windows and how to dual boot on a separate drive. Also note that this video should work for dual booting Windows 10 and Bazzite. Before we get started though, let's make sure we have everything we need for this installation. You'll need a USB flash drive of at least 16 GB, preferably USB 3 or better for faster installation. You'll also need a keyboard and mouse. I prefer wired, but wireless or Bluetooth should work just fine. Set aside an hour to an hour and a half of free time to complete the install without interruptions. You'll need to turn off fast boot in your BIOS. Finally, now this is important, make sure you back up any important data on your system. While dual booting is generally safe, things can sometimes break during the process, and it's better to be safe than sorry. So let's dive in and get your dual boot setup configured. Let's head over to bazzite.gg and click on the download button, and you'll get a wizard to help you download the right ISO file. First select your machine type, whether you're on a laptop, desktop or handheld device. Then select your GPU type, AMD, NVIDIA or Intel. Then choose your desktop environment. You can pick between KDE or GNOME. If you're used to Windows, I'd recommend selecting KDE as it has a more familiar layout. Depending on your hardware, you may see the option for Steam Game Mode versus Desktop Mode. Game Mode gives you a more Steam Deck type experience, while Desktop Mode is more like a traditional desktop. I'm going to pick Desktop Mode. Now we download our ISO file, and I'm going to download the hash file too, so we can verify our download. Once our ISO file is finished downloading, I like to verify the download to ensure that it hasn't been corrupted. I have a separate video for that where I use 7-zip to calculate the SHA-256 hash of the downloaded ISO. If you want to watch this video, please click on the link in the top right hand corner. Now let's create our bootable USB drive. First we need to download and install Fedora Media Writer. You can use Rufus if you prefer, but note that Ventoy is no longer supported for Bazzite installations. Insert your flash drive and open Fedora Media Writer. If you get a system error when you try and open Fedora Media Writer, you need to install Visual C++ Redistributable version 14 on your Windows system. For most people though, you'll already have this installed, as it's a common dependency for a number of software and games. Select ISO file, click on Next, then select your Bazzite ISO and click on the Write button. Note that all data on this drive will be erased. When you click on Write, this may take a few minutes depending on your USB drive speed. Once it's done writing, click on the Finish button and close Fedora Media Writer. Next, we need to disable Windows Fast Startup. This is not to be confused with Fast Boot, which is a BIOS setting. We want to disable Fast Startup, otherwise Windows might semi-hibernate and cause issues when you try and boot into Bazzite. Open Control Panel, click on Hardware and Sound, click on Change what the power buttons do, click on Change settings that are currently unavailable. You won't see any of these options on my screen as I'm running the install in a virtual machine. Untick Fast Startup, and I also like to untick Hibernate. Click on Save Changes And we're done. Next we need to make space for Bazzite on our drive. Right click on the menu and select Disk Management. Before we proceed, make sure that you see an EFI system partition in the list. If you don't see this, then it means that Windows is installed using CSM legacy mode instead of UEFI, and you'll need to reinstall Windows in UEFI mode before you can dual boot with Bazzite. Now right click on your main Windows partition and select Shrink Volume. You'll want to shrink it by at least 64 gigs to give Bazzite enough space. I'd recommend 100 gigs or more if you have the space available. Click on Shrink and wait for the process to complete. You should now see unallocated space at the end of your drive. If Windows doesn't let you shrink the drive, even though you have more than enough free space, then you might need to use another tool like EaseUS Partition Manager or similar to shrink the partition. If you're installing Bazzite on a drive that is larger than 2 terabytes, you'll need to shrink your Windows partition to just below 2 terabytes. Otherwise, you'll get an error when you try and install Bazzite, as it won't allow you to create any partitions. Since I'm going to be showing you how to dual boot using a separate drive too, I'm going to remove the partition completely on this second drive. Now it's time to boot from our USB drive. Restart your computer and enter your BIOS. This is usually done by pressing F12, F2, Escape or Delete during startup. It varies by manufacturer. Select your boot menu, then select your USB drive to boot the Bazzite ISO. Here you'll get 3 options in the grub menu. For best compatibility, especially on NVIDIA cards, I usually select Troubleshooting and then I select Basic Graphics Mode. Wait a while for the installer to start up. If you end up with just a grey screen, make sure that only a single monitor is plugged in. Select your language and click on Continue. Let's first look at how to install on a separate drive. The only difference is what we do in the Installation Destination screen. Click on Installation Destination. Here's something important. Make sure you only tick one drive. If you tick multiple drives, you'll end up with a RAID 0 type setup, which you typically don't want. Select your separate drive. You can tell which is the correct one by looking at the amount of free space. Leave it on automatic partitioning and click on Done. Now let me show you how to dual boot on the same drive as Windows, as you'll need to do this for handhelds and some laptops. This unfortunately is a lot more involved. Select Installation Destination. Select your main Windows drive. Here we don't want to use automatic partitioning, as it will share the EFI partition with Windows, which may cause issues in the future, as Windows sometimes recreates the EFI partition for some of its updates. Instead, we select Advanced Custom and click on Done. Now click on the free space on the drive, click on the plus button, change the size to MIB, change it to 300 megs, change the file system to EFI system partition, and change the mount point to /boot/EFI. Click on OK. Click on the free space again, click on the plus button, leave the size as gigabytes and change it to 1 gigabyte, leave the file system as extension 4 and change the mount point to /boot. Click on OK. Click on the free space again, click on plus, change the file system to BetterFS and click on OK. Now we need to configure our BetterFS volumes. So we're just going to click on our BetterFS volume on the left hand side here, click on the plus button. Our first volume is going to be root, so we're going to call it root, and the mount point is just a slash. Click on OK. Let's make our second BetterFS volume. Click on the plus button. Call this one var, and the mount point is /var. Then we're going to make our last BetterFS volume, which we're going to call home, and the mount point is /var/home. Click on OK. Now we should be done with the disk configuration side, so just click on Done. It will show you a summary of all the changes that are going to be made. Click on Accept Changes. If you don't set up a user, you'll have your username and password of both Bazzite lowercase. I'm going to click on User Creation, and I'm going to make a user called Mike. Click on Done to continue. Now we're ready to start the installation. Note that nothing has been written to disk yet. But this is the point of no return. Did you make that backup I mentioned earlier? Things can sometimes go wrong in the installation. If you forgot to back up something important, now's your last chance. Click on Begin Installation to start the install process. The installation will take several minutes, and it may look like the installer is stuck at times, but the progress bar is just not particularly accurate. When the installer gets around halfway, it will jump to complete. Looks like it's done. Now click on the Reboot System button to reboot the machine. If you end up back on the installer, just shut down the system, remove the USB drive, and start it up again. If the system boots straight into Windows, you can force Bazzite to boot by using the Boot from File option in most BIOSes. Note that this is a virtual machine BIOS, so your option may be in a very different location. Select Boot from File. The first option will be Windows's EFI partition, so we'll select the second option. Now select EFI, select Fedora, and then we want to select Shim x64.efi. Next up is the Secure Boot mock screen. You might not see the screen if you've installed Bazzite on this machine in the past, but for a fresh installation, you need to enroll the Bazzite Secure Boot key. Select Enroll Mock, select Continue, and select Yes to enroll the key. When it asks for a password, type Universal Blue. Note that nothing will display on the screen when you type. This is normal for password entry. Also note that the screen uses a US keyboard layout. If you're using a different keyboard layout, you'll need to type the password as if you had a US keyboard. If you have a different keyboard layout, have a look on the screen. Here are some alternative passwords listed for other layouts. Once the key is enrolled, select Reboot to restart the system. On the first boot of Bazzite, it does some initial configuration that can take 5 to 10 minutes. Once it's finished, you'll see the login screen. Log in with the username and password you created during install. If you didn't create a username and password, your username and password are both Bazzite lowercase. On first boot, Steam will automatically install. Once it's installed, log into Steam and you're ready to start gaming. But before we wrap up, I have a few tips and tricks to share. Since this is a dual boot guide, you're probably wondering how to get back into Windows when you need it. There are several ways to do this. The first option is to use your BIOS boot menu. Just restart the computer, press the boot menu key during startup, and select Windows Boot Manager from the list. The second option is to regenerate grub and add Windows to the grub menu. Open Terminal in Bazzite and run you just regenerate grub. Enter your password. Nothing will display while you type it. Press enter. Here it found Windows, and now there's a boot entry for Windows in the grub menu. The third option is to add a boot Windows shortcut directly in Steam. Run this command in the terminal. You just set boot Windows Steam. Press enter, type your password. You'll see nothing shows up. As before, press enter. And now if we look in Steam, we have this boot Windows option. When we execute this, it will boot into Windows. And if you're running Bazzite on a handheld device, there's an even easier way. Open Handheld Daemon by pressing the Quick Access menu button twice, jump into its settings, go to General, and you'll see an option to reboot into Windows. This makes switching between operating systems super convenient on handheld devices. If you get an error that says bad Shim signature, you need to load the kernel first. Don't panic. This is a secure boot error. I cover this in another video. Just follow the link in the top right hand corner. If you want to convert your flash drive back into a regular usable flash drive after you've done with the installation, here's how to do it. Insert your flash drive and open Fedora Media Writer. Select the Restore option. Click on Next. Click on Restore. And wait for the process to complete. And there you have it. You've successfully set up a dual boot system with Windows 11 and Bazzite. Now you can enjoy the best of both worlds. Windows for any software that requires it, and Bazzite for an amazing gaming experience. With the tips I've shared, you should be able to easily switch between operating systems and troubleshoot any common issues that might come up. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more Linux and Bazzite tutorials. If you have any questions or run into issues, drop a comment below and I'll do my best to help you out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.